My neighbor Leona called me at 6:30 a.m. "Honey, somebody's saying you died." I laughed until I opened Facebook. My magnolia tree, my porch. Caption, RIP Mama Dot. Posted by my own daughter-in-law. I took the first train home. The porch swing was gone. New locks. A for sale sign in my yard. On paper, I was dead. Before I show you how I walked into my own memorial and took my life back, tap subscribe, tell me where you're watching from, and please share this with one person you love. This can happen to anyone. Now let's get into it. My name is Dorothy Ann Walker. I'm 71 years old, a widow of 9 years, and a retired school principal. I live in the same modest 2-story house I bought with my late husband in 1982. We raised our only son there. I planted a magnolia tree in the front yard the day we moved in. That tree is taller than the house now. People in the neighborhood call me Auntie Dot, even the ones who aren't related. I've taught their children, baked for their fundraisers, and hosted more church meetings than I can count. I don't live lavishly. I still shop with coupons. I drive a used Camry. I have the same vinyl blinds I installed back in '98. But make no mistake, I'm not poor. I just never saw the point of showing off. I worked hard for what I have, and I planned for everything, except this. It started as a simple trip. 2 weeks down to Mobile, Alabama, to visit my younger sister, Bernice. She had hip surgery last spring, and I hadn't been down there since. I packed 2 small bags, left food in the freezer, turned the water off, and handed a spare key to my daughter-in-law, Chanel, in case the mail piled up. She smiled sweetly, said of course, and even offered to drive me to the train station. "Take your time, Mama Dot," she said, calling me the name she only used when she wanted something. "We'll keep an eye on things. Enjoy your trip." Jamal didn't come to see me off. He said he had a client meeting. That's what he always says lately. So I went. I had my sister, my porch rocking chair, and no responsibilities. We watched old westerns at night and drank coffee in the morning while birds chirped over the sound of the neighbor's mower. I didn't miss the city. I didn't even check my phone. But Leona Brooks did. Ms. Leona is my neighbor back home. 66, ex-court clerk, sharp as a tack and nosy as she is loyal. On the 8th day of my trip, she called me. It was 6:30 in the morning. "Dorothy," she said, her voice tight, "I know this is going to sound crazy, but someone's saying you died." My first instinct was to laugh. "Leona, what are you talking about? I'm sitting here eating a blueberry muffin." "I know, baby, but I overheard Chanel's cousin at the beauty shop. Said she was heading to a memorial service this weekend. For you. Said you passed in your sleep and got cremated." The fork froze halfway to my mouth. Leona continued, voice growing shakier. "And when I got home, I checked Facebook. Chanel posted a photo of your magnolia tree with a caption, RIP to the strongest woman I ever knew. Sleep peacefully, Mama Dot." My stomach turned. I opened my phone. I hadn't checked it in days. My hands shook as I pulled up Facebook. There it was, a picture of my own front yard, my tree, my porch swing, and a post by Chanel with crying emojis, doves, and scripture. Over 200 likes, dozens of comments. I didn't even know she was sick. She's with the angels now. "Chanel, I'm so sorry for your loss." I dropped the phone. "Dorothy?" Leona said. "Did you see it?" "She declared me dead, Leona." "She sure did." I tried calling Jamal. No answer. I tried Chanel. Voicemail. I called again and again. Nothing. Leona's voice turned fierce. "Baby, you need to come home. Now." I left the next morning with my bag zipped and my heart pounding. Bernice wanted to come with me, but I told her to stay. I didn't know what I was walking into, and I didn't want her caught in the crossfire. I took the 7:15 a.m. train from Mobile back to Atlanta. The ride felt longer than ever. My mind raced through every possibility. Was this some kind of twisted mistake? A cruel joke? But the pit in my stomach said otherwise. No one accidentally fakes a death. Not with Facebook posts, not with eulogies, and certainly not with cremation lies. And Chanel? Chanel didn't just want me gone. She needed me to be. But why? The answer was already waiting on my lawn. The sun was setting as the train pulled into the station. I didn't call a cab. I walked. With every step, my anger grew heavier, like stones in my pockets. By the time I reached my street, I was sweating, but I didn't slow down. I turned the corner and saw it. My house. Except it wasn't mine anymore. The porch swing was gone. The flower pots were removed. A shiny new lock was on the front door. And in the yard, a for sale sign. I just stood there, on the sidewalk, in my own neighborhood, staring at the home I built, the home where I raised my son, the home where I said goodbye to my husband. I pulled out my phone, one more time, and I called the only person I trusted more than myself, Mr. Ellis. He picked up on the first ring. "Dorothy," he said, calm as ever. "I had a feeling you'd be calling." "Raymond," I said, eyes locked on the for sale sign in my yard. "Someone killed me. On paper." His voice didn't waver. "Then it's time to bring you back to life. Officially." That's when I knew. This wasn't just betrayal. This was war. When Mr. Ellis hung up, his voice still echoing in my ear, I stayed rooted to the sidewalk outside my own house. It felt like standing at the edge of a crime scene, except the victim was me, and the killer had a manicure and designer heels. Chanel had always been ambitious, but I never thought she'd be audacious enough to erase me on paper. The next morning, while still staying at a small motel 2 neighborhoods away, I did what I've always done best. I gathered facts. Leona met me at a diner at dawn. She wore her old court clerk badge on a lanyard as if it gave her strength. She slid a manila folder across the table, and for the first time, I saw my own death certificate. There it was, my name, my date of birth, my address. Cause of death, cardiac arrest in sleep. Signed by a doctor I'd never heard of. Cremation box checked. The signature at the bottom was a forged scribble of a funeral director from a crematorium I'd never visited. "Where did you get this?" I whispered. "A friend at probate," Leona said. "Off the record. They filed it last Thursday. Chanel submitted it online." She looked me dead in the eyes. "Dorothy, she didn't just tell people you died. She made it real in the system." I flipped through the pages, my hands trembling. The death certificate had been used to transfer ownership of my accounts, my car, even my pension. Leona had circled in red the authorization form Chanel used to access my house deed. "And Jamal?" I asked quietly. Leona sighed. "He signed as next of kin. Said you always wanted a private cremation." I closed my eyes. "He knows better." "Does he?" she asked softly. "You've kept your finances quiet. You've always lived small. He probably thinks you have nothing." That stung more than I wanted to admit. I'd taught my son humility, but had I also taught him blindness? Had my frugal life made me look weak, disposable even? "What else?" I asked. Leona slid another printout across the table. "Her Facebook posts. Look at the dates." I scrolled through Chanel's page. The first post about my passing was 3 days after I left for Alabama. A black and white photo of my wedding ring on the windowsill captioned, "She's gone. Rest in power." Comments poured in. Cousins offered condolences. Church members posted Bible verses. People were arranging food trains and sending money to help Jamal through this tough time. My jaw clenched. "They're collecting sympathy money. They're collecting everything," Leona said grimly. By the time our coffee had gone cold, I had a list of all the things Chanel had done with my death. She'd closed my small savings account and transferred it to a joint account with Jamal, sold my car to a cousin for cash, listed my house for sale under a quick transfer probate loophole, claimed to have cremated me to explain why no one saw a body, and she'd done it all with a smile and a tearful voice, the perfect grieving daughter-in-law. "This isn't just greed," Leona said. "This is a scheme." "It's fraud," I corrected, "and it's going to end." I paid for our breakfast in cash and stepped outside into the morning sun. It felt too bright, too cheerful for what I was feeling. But inside, a quiet fury was solidifying. This wasn't the time for tears. It was time for strategy. That afternoon, I walked the perimeter of my house. A young realtor with a clipboard was inside, showing my kitchen to a couple. I stayed across the street, hidden under my hat. From this distance, it was like watching a stranger's life being dismantled piece by piece. On my porch, a vase of fake lilies stood where my real ones used to be. Chanel's touch. The magnolia tree had a black ribbon tied to it like a stage prop. I felt my nails dig into my palm. When the realtor stepped out to make a phone call, I moved closer. Through the window, I could see my dining room stripped bare, the family photos gone, my husband's military flag folded and missing from its case. Even the quilt my grandmother made me was gone. God help me, I muttered. She emptied my life. That night in the motel, I spread all the papers across the bed. Death certificate, property listing, bank transfers, screenshots of Facebook posts. Leona had given me everything she could dig up. It was like laying out a puzzle where every piece screamed betrayal. I thought of Jamal, my only child, the boy who used to bring me Mother's Day cards made of construction paper, the man who now signed forms declaring me dead without a second thought. Did he even hesitate? Did he ask to see a body? Did he notice there was no funeral home invoice? My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. It was a screenshot of Chanel at a wine bar toasting with her friends. The caption read, "New chapter begins." I didn't reply. I turned off the phone and stared at the ceiling. All my life, I'd believed in teaching lessons gently, in letting people reveal their true selves without interference. But this was a lesson that needed a witness. The next morning, I called Mr. Ellis again. We met at a quiet cafe on the edge of town. He arrived in a navy suit, briefcase in hand, his expression unreadable. He sat across from me and began speaking before I even opened my folder. "I've seen the documents," he said calmly. "This is bigger than a family dispute. We're looking at identity theft, financial fraud, real estate fraud, and filing of false public records." "What can we do?" I asked. "First, we stop the sale of your house. I'll file an emergency injunction. Then we notify the bank and the pension board. They'll freeze the accounts pending investigation. After that," he leaned in, "we decide how public you want this to be." I hesitated. Public? You can walk back into your life quietly, or you can walk into that memorial they're planning and let everyone see you're alive. I pictured Chanel's face, Jamal's, the cousins, the church ladies clutching their pearls. I pictured the room gasping as I walked in, and for the first time in days, I almost smiled. "Public," I said. Mr. Ellis nodded. "Then we prepare." We spent the next hour making a plan. He'd coordinate with a sheriff's deputy to serve papers at the memorial. Leona would continue feeding us intel from the neighborhood. I would stay out of sight until the right moment. As I left the cafe, I caught my reflection in the window. Same woman, same simple clothes, but something in my eyes had changed. The softness was still there, but behind it was steel. They thought they could write me off like a line item on a will. They thought wrong. This wasn't just about getting my house back. This was about my name, my dignity, my life. And when I walked back into that memorial, I wasn't going alone. I was bringing the law with me. 3 days before the so-called memorial, Chanel was on a roll. She'd turned her own grief into a performance, one she was staging for maximum benefit. Every Instagram story was a slideshow of my house, my backyard, my porch swing, now gone. She captioned it all with dramatic Bible quotes. "The righteous perish and no one takes it to heart" was one of her favorites. She even posted a black and white selfie of herself in faux mourning attire, black lace veil, tight dress, and a caption that read, "Planning her final goodbye. I hope I make her proud." Proud? I nearly threw my phone. According to Leona, who was still gathering neighborhood gossip like breadcrumbs, Chanel had been telling everyone I passed peacefully in my sleep while visiting a friend. Not my sister, just a friend. She said my body was already cremated per her wishes, and that I had requested a private ceremony with no open casket and no public obituary. The lies were crafted to keep questions away. She didn't want a church full of people wondering why there was no body. She didn't want anyone asking to speak, and she definitely didn't want me walking through the door. The audacity didn't stop at family posts. Mr. Ellis had pulled Chanel's recent financial activities. With the death certificate in hand, she'd accessed one of my older life insurance policies that had been dormant since 2003, only worth about $15,000. But she cashed it out. Then she drained the modest account I had at Fulton County Credit Union. She used my pension confirmation letter to file a false beneficiary change, redirecting checks to her and Jamal's joint account. Mr. Ellis caught that in time. The board froze it just 2 hours before a direct deposit was supposed to hit, all in the name of grief. The part that cut deepest wasn't even the money. It was the messages Jamal had sent to friends. We saw them. Leona pulled screenshots from a church friend's nephew who followed Jamal on Facebook. Jamal had written, "It's been hard. Mama and I were never close, but I still can't believe she's gone. Chanel has been my rock. She handled everything while I fell apart." Never close? I raised that boy myself. There wasn't a scraped knee I didn't bandage. I worked double shifts when he wanted football gear. I cried when he got his diploma. But now, in front of his friends, I was reduced to a ghost he barely tolerated. I didn't know what Chanel had fed him. I didn't know how much was manipulation, how much was cowardice. But I knew one thing for sure. They weren't just cleaning out my bank account. They were rewriting my legacy. Mr. Ellis met me again 2 days before the memorial. He'd filed a motion to halt the home sale. It was granted, temporarily, while the ownership was contested. A court hearing was scheduled for the week after the memorial. The bank accounts were frozen, the pension checks blocked. "You now exist again in the legal system," he said dryly. "Congratulations." "Is there any record of a body?" I asked. He shook his head. "No hospital, no coroner, no official death pronouncement. The cremation form was a free online template. She filed it under the radar, assuming no one would question it. And they didn't. Because most people don't fake deaths, Dorothy." That made me laugh, a bitter kind of laugh that scraped the back of my throat. The best part? Chanel had arranged the memorial at one of those upscale, multi-purpose event centers, the kind that does weddings on Saturday, baby showers on Sunday, and celebrations of life sandwiched in between. "It's invite only," Leona said, grinning over her teacup. "But I RSVP'd as your cousin Reba from Macon." I couldn't help but smirk. The event was scheduled for Sunday at noon. No church, no pastor, just a sleek black and white affair with floral centerpieces and a catering table. Chanel had made a flyer. It had my name on it, a photo of me in my garden, and a poem beneath it about how some angels never truly leave. Ironic. She tried to erase me, and now she was memorializing me. All for optics. Jamal had his own role to play. Leona overheard him at the barber shop telling someone how he planned to read a letter he wrote to Mama aloud at the service. A letter where he confessed he wished they'd had a better relationship, that he regretted how distant they'd become. Regret. That would have been nice when I was alive and cooking him Sunday dinner. I sat with Mr. Ellis and a sheriff's deputy the night before the event. The plan was set. They would arrive with me at precisely 12:30 p.m., halfway through the speeches, when emotions were high and cameras were rolling. We'd walk in together. He would serve the paperwork. The deputy would confirm my identity. No screaming, no chaos, just presence. "Are you ready?" Mr. Ellis asked. "I'm past ready." That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the motel room with the lights off, watching the window glow orange with city light. I thought of my husband. I wished he were here to see this. He always said, "Dot. Folks mistake your silence for softness, but I know you got fire in you." He was right. I laid out my outfit like armor. A long black coat, church hat with a single feather, black gloves, and a pearl pin my mother left me. Not flashy, just enough. The kind of look that says, "I am still here." and you cannot deny me." Morning came. I rode in the back of Mr. Ellis's car. He drove. The deputy followed in a separate vehicle. I didn't speak much, just watched the city blur by, watched the blocks I grew up around, watched people who still thought I was gone. The event center sat on a corner lot. From outside, it looked like a wedding was about to begin. Big floral arrangements stood on easels near the entrance. A large printed portrait of me smiled at passing cars, and I almost didn't recognize myself. Mr. Ellis parked down the block. We waited in the car. I listened to the wind. I pictured Chanel greeting people inside, collecting hugs and fake sympathy. At exactly 12:30 p.m., Mr. Ellis said, "Shall we?" I opened the car door and stepped into my resurrection. The moment my heels touched the pavement in front of the event hall, the air shifted. It was like stepping into a play you didn't audition for, but realizing halfway in that you were the lead. I straightened my coat, adjusted the feather on my hat, and nodded to Mr. Ellis and the deputy. The three of us walked as one. Outside, two cousins I hadn't seen in years were taking selfies beside a memorial banner with my face printed large in pastel colors. They didn't recognize me at first, but one did a double take. "Is that?" the other gasped. "Oh my God!" I kept walking. The doors were open. Inside, Chanel was mid-speech, holding a microphone in her perfectly manicured hand. She wore a fitted black dress, pearls, and just enough mascara to cry on cue. She always told me, "Chanel, take care of this family," and I promised I would. Mama Dot was like a second mother to me. That was when the room saw me. First, it was a woman near the refreshments who gasped and dropped her cup. Then a young cousin in the back shouted, "Is that Auntie Dot?" The room collectively turned. I kept walking. Chanel's mouth hung open. Her hands froze mid-gesture. Her face turned a color I'd never seen before, somewhere between ash and milk. And then I spoke. "Apologies for being late to my own funeral," I said, loud enough to echo. Gasps, screams, phones out. Someone shouted, "She's alive?" A church lady crossed herself. Someone dropped their plate of deviled eggs. Jamal, standing beside the podium, staggered back like he'd been punched. Mama?" I looked straight at him. "Did you think you'd never see me again?" Chanel dropped the mic, literally. The thud of it hitting the floor echoed through the speakers. Mr. Ellis stepped forward. "Raymond Ellis, legal counsel. This woman, Dorothy Ann Walker, is very much alive and in full legal possession of her identity, home, accounts, and rights. Sheriff?" The deputy beside him pulled out 2 envelopes. "Chanel Davis Walker and Jamal Walker," he announced. "You're being served. Allegations include, but are not limited to, filing false documents, identity fraud, illegal transfer of property, and financial theft." Chanel tried to speak, but no words came. Her hands trembled. This isn't what it looks like," she stammered. "Oh?" I said, stepping closer. "Because it looks like you cremated a living woman and sold her house." More phones came out. People were filming. The murmurs turned into a storm of whispers. "Is this real? She faked a whole death? Wasn't even a body." I glanced at Jamal. He looked broken, like his soul had been scooped out. "I didn't know," he said. I thought it was what you wanted. She said you had a will, said it was in your Bible." "My Bible?" I almost laughed. "Boy, I haven't written a will since before you got married, and if you believed I'd get cremated with no funeral, no pastor, and no hymns, then you never knew me at all." He blinked hard. "I didn't read the documents. I just signed." "You signed away my life." Silence. Chanel took a step toward me. Voice quivering. "Mama Dot, don't you dare call me that." She flinched. "I opened my home to you. I cooked for you, defended you when folks whispered, and you killed me on paper for a condo and a commission check." She covered her mouth. The deputy moved forward again. "You'll both need to report for booking by 5 p.m. today. If you fail to appear, warrants will be issued." The room had frozen. A woman in the front row started crying. A man in the back was live streaming. Chanel turned to Jamal. "Say something." He didn't. He just sat down, as if the weight of it all had finally pinned him to the earth. I turned back to the crowd. "I appreciate those of you who truly cared," I said, "but this wasn't a tribute. It was a theft, dressed up in flowers and fabric." Then I walked out. No more words, no drama. I didn't need to scream. The truth had landed like thunder. Outside, Leona was waiting in her car. "Lord have mercy," she said as I got in. "That was cleaner than any courtroom I've ever seen." Mr. Ellis and the deputy followed behind in separate cars. We pulled away from the curb as the chaos unraveled behind us. Chanel yelling, guests scattering. One cousin fainted. Another was arguing with the caterer about refunds. Me? I just rolled the window down and took a deep breath, but there was still one thing left undone: my house. That evening, Mr. Ellis took me to the real estate office where Chanel had filed the sale papers. We waited until the office cleared out. Then, with a motion in hand from the court, he delivered an official cease and desist to the broker. The sale was halted indefinitely. "The property is flagged," Mr. Ellis said. "No title transfers, no offers, no showings. Until this is resolved, it's frozen." "Good," I said, "because I'm going home tomorrow." He looked at me, half smiling. "You ready for that?" I buried my husband in that house. I raised a son. I planted a tree. I scrubbed those kitchen tiles with my bare hands. I'm not letting someone who's never washed a baseboard sell my life out from under me. Mr. Ellis didn't argue. Leona dropped me off at the motel one last time. I thanked her with a long hug. We didn't say much. She just squeezed my hand and said, "You rose, baby, just like Lazarus." And I did. The next morning, I packed my things. I wore my Sunday dress, not because it was church, but because it was a kind of resurrection. I called a cab, not wanting to take Mr. Ellis away from his office. The driver didn't ask questions as I handed him the address. When we pulled onto my block, the magnolia tree was blooming. I stepped out, walked up the path, and opened my front door with the original key Chanel never thought to take. Everything inside was stripped. Empty shelves, blank walls. But the bones were still mine. And I was finally home. The first thing I did when I walked back into my house, my real, living, breathing house, was take off my shoes and stand in the middle of the hardwood floor. It was quiet. Not the silence of grief or emptiness, but a different kind. The kind of quiet that settles over something stolen and returned. Like an apology from the universe, whispered through floorboards and light fixtures. There were boxes scattered along the hallway walls. Chanel's, labeled in thick black marker. Mama Dot's linens. Kitchen stuff. Tamam. I walked past them and into my bedroom. My comforter was gone. The old rocking chair I used to read in was replaced with a pile of fancy handbags I'd never seen before. My bedside Bible. Missing. Replaced by a copy of Vogue. I smiled to myself, but there was no joy in it. They had scrubbed me out of my own life. Later that afternoon, Leona came by with a folding chair and a grocery bag full of essentials. Lysol, paper towels, bleach, and cornbread. "Just the basics," she said, walking into my kitchen like no time had passed. We cleaned together. She sprayed, I wiped. Neither of us spoke for a while. It was a rhythm we'd shared during church cleanup days. One person scrubs while the other hums. Around dusk, as we were taking a break on the steps of the porch, she pulled out a manila folder from her purse. "What's that?" I asked. "Something you should see." Inside were emails, correspondence between Chanel and a crematorium 2 counties over, except the dates didn't add up. The emails were dated 4 days after Chanel claimed I'd already been cremated. "She never even went through with it," Leona said. "She just told everyone you were ashes and counted on no one asking questions. There wasn't even a fake urn, no ceremony, no ashes to scatter, just a story, and a community too polite to question it." "And no one did," I said quietly. She nodded. "Not until now." Mr. Ellis confirmed it the next morning. Chanel had never submitted any official paperwork to a licensed crematorium. The one she emailed eventually replied and told her they couldn't proceed without a death certificate filed by a licensed medical professional. That part never happened, so she faked the rest. There was no urn, no ashes, just lies. When Mr. Ellis filed the amended legal brief later that day, it included this new evidence. The fraud charge was no longer hypothetical. It was solid, documented, provable. "I've requested an emergency hearing for Monday morning," he told me. "We'll be asking for full reinstatement of identity, public record corrections, and criminal referral." And Chanel? She and Jamal will be in attendance. Their attorney reached out. That gave me pause. "They have a lawyer now?" He nodded. "Same one who handled Chanel's real estate license. She's trying to claim she was misled by a third party. Some non-existent clerk she says provided her with fake documents." I scoffed. That girl couldn't even fake an allergy properly at potluck. Now she's orchestrating an entire fake death through a phantom clerk? He smiled faintly. "Desperation makes people creative." That Sunday night, I sat in the empty living room with only one lamp on, staring at a blank wall where family pictures used to be. I thought of my husband again, how he would have handled all this. Firm but quiet, he'd always say. Truth doesn't need a megaphone, it walks in, and the room listens. I didn't know what tomorrow's courtroom would look like, but I knew how I'd walk in. Not angry, not loud, just present, alive. I spent the evening printing every document Mr. Ellis had compiled. I placed it all in a binder, tabs, highlights, timestamps. I wasn't going to sit like a passive grandmother in that courtroom. I was going in with proof, pride, and a pearl pin on my collar. At 10 p.m., I received a call from a blocked number. I let it go to voicemail, then checked the message. "Hi, Mama. It's Jamal. I don't know what to say. I thought you should know I didn't mean for this to happen. He used to leave little notes like that when he was a boy. Once, after breaking a neighbor's window with his soccer ball, he wrote, 'I'm sorry, Mama. I'll fix it.' Back then, sorry came with action, not excuses. Chanel said it was what you wanted, and when you didn't come home, I believed her. Maybe because I wanted to. Anyway, I'll see you in court, I guess. I'm sorry." I stared at the phone. Sorry? Sorry didn't rebuild trust, didn't erase a forged signature. Sorry was a pillow after a storm, soft but soggy. I deleted the message. The courthouse was cold the next morning. Leona met me outside the steps with coffee and a new brooch she said matched my suit. Mr. Ellis was already inside, preparing the file. We walked in just as the clerk was calling names. Chanel sat on the other side of the courtroom, all in gray. Jamal beside her, looking like a boy again. I didn't acknowledge them. Didn't need to. The silence said enough. The judge, an older black woman with no patience for nonsense, took the bench and called us forward. Mr. Ellis presented the documents. He spoke calmly, methodically. He explained the forged death certificate, the fake cremation claim, the financial transfers. The judge asked 2 questions. Was a body ever produced? No, Your Honor. Is the supposed deceased present in this courtroom today? Mr. Ellis turned to me. I stood. My name is Dorothy Ann Walker. I am not dead. I have never been sick. I have never authorized any cremation, and I have never signed any transfer of property or accounts. I have documentation to prove it. The judge nodded. So noted. She turned to Chanel and Jamal. Do you dispute any of this? Their attorney stood and tried to dance around the facts, claiming there was miscommunication, a misunderstanding, and a clerical error. But the judge wasn't having it. Ms. Davis Walker, do you have any credible documentation that supports your actions? Chanel didn't answer. Do you have any proof you were acting under legal authority? No, Your Honor, she whispered. The judge leaned forward. Then I find cause to forward this matter for criminal investigation. All previous property and financial transfers are frozen. Ms. Walker's identity is reinstated in full, effective immediately. Gavel down, done. As I walked out of the courtroom, Reporters were already gathering outside. Word had gotten out. A dead woman showing up in court was the kind of story that didn't need embellishment. But I didn't speak to them. Not yet. I had something else to do first. The courthouse victory should have felt like a finale, but in truth, it was only an intermission. The legal system had confirmed what I already knew. I wasn't dead. But in the minds of those around me, my family, my community, my son, what I meant to them had already been buried. The headlines made it worse. Woman declared dead by family shows up at own memorial. Atlanta widow fakes no more, legal resurrection stuns city. The ghost who pressed charges. Leona brought the papers to my doorstep like it was morning coffee. Your front page, Dot, she said, half proud, half sorrowful. They're calling you the Lazarus Lady. I didn't respond, just flipped through the articles. They had everything right, except what mattered. No one talked about the betrayal. No one printed how it felt to be erased by your own child. No one published the cost of returning. The community that once called me Ms. Dorothy with warmth now stared at me like I was an apparition. The ladies from the choir avoided my eyes in the supermarket. The pastor texted me a Bible verse but never called. Everyone believed the lie when it was convenient. Now that the truth had arrived, it made them uncomfortable. But Chanel? She thrived in the discomfort. The very next week, she was back online, posting vague quotes about forgiveness, second chances, and how some people can't let go of the past. She didn't mention me by name, of course, but anyone with sense could read between the lines. She even posted a picture of herself in front of a mirror wearing one of my scarves with a caption that read, "Some things we carry, some things we let go." The comments were split. Some women cheered her on. Others asked where Jamal was. A few brave ones asked about the memorial drama. She deleted those. I stayed off social media. I didn't need digital noise. My house was quiet again, and that was enough. For now. Then came the letters, from the bank, from the DMV, from the county clerk, all addressed to the estate of Dorothy A. Walker. I had to go in person to fix each one. "Ma'am, your file says you're deceased." "Ma'am, we need a court order to restore your license." "Ma'am, we don't normally uncremate people." It became routine. Folder under my arm, documents in triplicate, Mr. Ellis on standby. I became an expert in postmortem bureaucracy. The DMV worker even asked for a selfie. "I've never met someone who came back from the dead before," she laughed. I didn't laugh. I just smiled, took my license, and walked out. Jamal hadn't reached out since the court date. No visits, no letters, no calls. At first, I told myself it was shame, that he needed time to process, that he'd eventually come knocking with tearful eyes and a shaky apology. But as the weeks passed, I began to accept something colder. He wasn't coming. He chose silence over truth. One day, I spotted him outside the grocery store. He was alone, loading water bottles into his trunk. I watched from across the lot, hidden behind the reflection of my own car window. He looked older, tired, but not sad. When he turned and caught my eyes across the pavement, he paused. I raised my hand in the smallest wave. He looked away, got in, drove off. That night, I sat on my porch and asked myself the question I hadn't dared speak. What if my son never comes back? Not physically, but emotionally. Spiritually. What if this wound was permanent? Leona joined me not long after. She brought lemonade and silence. "You ever think you raised a stranger?" I asked. She took her time answering. "Sometimes people get raised right," she said, "but then they marry wrong, and the wrongness rubs off until they don't recognize themselves." I nodded. "But Jamal signed the forms," I whispered. "He chose it." "He did," she agreed. "And one day, he'll have to live with that. But you? You don't carry his shame, Dot. You carry your name, and you fought to keep it." The hearing for the criminal case was scheduled 2 months out. Mr. Ellis told me the DA was reviewing the evidence. Likely charges included falsifying public records, attempted real estate fraud, and theft by deception. But don't expect jail time, he warned. I don't want jail, I said. I want them to stop. He nodded. We'll ensure that. In the meantime, Chanel lost her real estate license, temporarily suspended pending investigation. Her broker dropped her. She scrubbed her bio from the agency site. Her apology finally came. But not to me. She wrote a post titled, "What Grief Made Me Do." It went viral. She called it a mental health spiral, said she was overwhelmed, claimed she thought I was actually dead when she filed the papers, blamed misinformation, stress, confusion, but not herself, never herself. She got sympathy. She got reposts. A podcast even invited her to speak about grief and misunderstanding. And I got the mail. Electric bill, jury summons. One letter addressed to Dorothy Walker, deceased. Still, I took a walk to the church that Sunday. Pastor Hill met me at the door. He looked sheepish. "Ms. Dorothy," he said, "you look well." "Compared to what?" I asked. "Dry." He didn't have an answer. I walked past him and sat in the last pew. No one spoke. No one turned. But I felt the weight of 100 sideways glances. After the service, one woman approached me, Sister Bernice. She patted my hand. "We didn't know what to say," she said. "We just believed her." "It's all right," I said. "You're not the first." She handed me a Tupperware container of peach cobbler. "You're still ours," she whispered. And for the first time in weeks, I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't entirely alone. A month passed, then 2. And slowly, life began to drape itself back over my days like an old quilt, patched in places, worn thin in others, but still intact. I picked up my routine: coffee on the porch, a walk to the store on Wednesdays, Bible study at Leona's on Fridays, though we spent more time gossiping than reading scripture. I even found myself humming again when I cleaned. Just faint little melodies from my childhood that came and went like birds. But no matter how full the days looked, the house felt different, hollow, the kind of emptiness that doesn't echo but lingers. You start to get used to it. You start talking to yourself, answering back. That's when the phone rang again. I was trimming the dead leaves off my spider plant when it buzzed. Unknown number. I stared at it for a moment. These days, every call carried a kind of charge. It might be the court, might be a reporter, might be Jamal. I answered. A woman's voice, young, uncertain. "Hi, is this Ms. Dorothy Walker?" "Yes." "My name is Simone Ellis. I'm Mr. Ellis's daughter." I straightened up. "Oh, hello." "I'm sorry to call like this. My father asked me to relay a message. He had an emergency case out of state and couldn't reach you before flying out. But he wanted to let you know Chanel filed a formal response to the criminal inquiry." My chest tightened. "He says she's requesting a plea agreement, claims she's willing to return all funds, make a public statement, and take a deferred sentence if you agree not to pursue jail time." I was quiet. Simone hesitated. "He wanted to know if you'd be willing to review the terms and sign off before next week." "I'll need to see it myself." "Of course. He'll overnight the documents." "Thank you, Simone, and tell your father to travel safe." We hung up. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed listening to the wind rattle the windows, the same wind that used to scare Jamal when he was a boy. He'd crawl into bed beside me, whispering, "It's just the trees." "Right, Mama?" Now the wind blew straight through me. The next morning, the documents arrived by courier. I sat at the kitchen table with Leona and read through them slowly. Chanel was offering a full restitution package. The pension reimbursements, the life insurance withdrawal, even the money she made from liquidating my jewelry. She'd give it all back, with interest. In return, no prison, just community service, probation, and a formal public apology. Leona sipped her tea. That girl doesn't want orange jumpsuit photos showing up on her LinkedIn. Probably already drafted the apology post, I muttered. But something in me twisted. This wasn't about vengeance. I didn't want to see Chanel behind bars. I didn't want her dragged through the mud, but I wanted her to look me in the face and say it, not to a judge, not to a court, to me. I want a meeting, I told Leona. She raised an eyebrow. Just me, her, and Jamal. No lawyers, no cameras, no internet. Leona nodded. Closure. Not for me, I said. For truth. 3 days later, it happened. Chanel and Jamal arrived together. Late, of course. She wore sunglasses like she was hiding from a paparazzi that didn't exist. He wore a hoodie and guilt. I had set out 3 chairs in the backyard under the magnolia tree, the same tree Jamal used to climb when he was 6, the same one we planted after his father died. Sit, I said. They did. Chanel tried to speak first. No, I interrupted. You'll listen, both of you. Jamal looked like he'd shrink into the grass. Chanel crossed her legs and adjusted her glasses. You lied, I began. You told the world I was gone. You took my name, my house, my memories, and you turned them into hashtags and down payments. Chanel opened her mouth. Quiet. She closed it. You stood in front of my photo and wept fake tears for a woman who wasn't even buried. You planned a future on the ruins of a life you didn't build. I turned to Jamal. And you let her. Maybe you didn't start it. Maybe you didn't forge the papers, but you let it happen. You signed. You shrugged. You said nothing. That's worse. He looked up. Mama, No more mama. You lost that privilege when you buried me in silence. His eyes watered. He didn't wipe them. I leaned back. You want mercy? I've already given it. I'm not pressing for jail, but I am demanding honesty from both of you. Chanel took off her sunglasses. I was scared, she said quietly. When you disappeared, I thought, maybe you really had died. You didn't tell anyone you were leaving. You went off grid. And that gave you permission to fake a funeral? She winced. No, I saw an opportunity. I was behind on bills. We were drowning. And I thought, if no one misses her, maybe... I stood, walked to the porch, looked at the wind chimes. You thought I wouldn't come back. She didn't answer. You didn't think I was dead, I said. You hoped I wouldn't return. That's not fear. That's calculation. She wiped her eyes. Jamal spoke again. I was weak. I still am. I let her do it. I wanted peace more than I wanted truth. And you got neither. He nodded. I'll sign the agreement, I said, but I don't forgive you. Not yet. They both looked up. Forgiveness is earned, with time, with effort, with changed behavior. You'll spend the rest of your life proving you're not the people who did this. That's your sentence. I walked back to the table, handed them each a copy of the agreement. They signed. When they left, I sat in the yard long after sunset. The wind rustled the magnolia tree, and for the first time, it didn't sound like ghosts. It sounded like breath. The days after the meeting under the magnolia tree were quiet, but not in the same way as before. Something had shifted. It was like my home exhaled with me. There were no more knocks on the door, no more certified letters, no headlines, no phone calls from blocked numbers. Even Chanel's social media went silent for a time. She vanished from the digital world just long enough for people to forget the scandal and remember the brunches. I watched the dust settle. Jamal didn't come back, but I didn't expect him to. Closure doesn't always come with hugs and healing. Sometimes it's just the end of questions. A week later, I got an invitation, a legal ethics seminar. Mr. Ellis was one of the keynote speakers and wanted to include my case in his lecture on identity fraud and elder abuse. He said it would be anonymous, of course, but I could attend if I wanted. Why me? I asked. Because you stood up, he replied, and most don't. I didn't give him an answer right away. Instead, I walked into my bedroom and looked at myself in the mirror. No makeup, just me. 71 years of life, a widow, a mother, a woman who had died on paper, and come back with more than just breath. I nodded to myself. I went. The seminar was held in a clean, bright university hall. Most of the audience looked like young law students with laptops and coffee cups too big for their hands. I sat near the back, beside Leona. She dressed up more than I did. Floral blouse, earrings, the works. I wore my Sunday gray, something modest but sturdy. When Mr. Ellis got to my story, the room hushed. He didn't name me, just spoke facts. Imagine being declared dead. Imagine someone you trusted filing false documents, selling your home, taking your accounts. Now imagine showing up to your own funeral. The students were silent. Some typed, some stared. He clicked through slides, showed snippets of legal code, cited case law. But the room didn't come alive until the last slide. A single quote. "The dead don't sue, but I do." Gasps. A few chuckles. One young woman whispered to her classmate, "That's cold-blooded." Mr. Ellis smiled. And then he gestured to the back of the room. "If she's comfortable, the woman behind that quote is here today." Heads turned. I stood up, not because I wanted to, but because I had to. They clapped. Not the loud standing kind, the respectful kind, the kind that acknowledged survival. I nodded once, then sat. After the seminar, a few students approached me. One asked, "What did it feel like, knowing your own child believed you were better off gone?" I didn't flinch. "It didn't feel," I said. "It hollowed." Another asked, "Would you do anything differently?" I thought about that for a long moment. "No," I finally answered, "because I didn't make the mistake, I just cleaned it up." They nodded, took notes, moved on. Leona beamed beside me. "You're a legend now," she whispered. I didn't feel like one. I just felt like myself again. Later that week, I got a letter. Not from Jamal, from his daughter, my granddaughter. A soft envelope, childish handwriting. Inside, a drawing, crayon-colored. It showed a tree, a house, a lady with glasses. And one sentence, "I'm glad you came back." I cried. Not the kind of cry people see. The quiet kind. The kind that leaks when you least expect it. That night, I put the drawing on the fridge, right next to the grocery list and Leona's peach cobbler recipe. Maybe, just maybe, something had been preserved. 2 weeks later, I found myself back at church. Not because I felt obligated, because I wanted to. The same pew, the same soft red cushion. Pastor Hill still fumbled through his verses, and Sister Bernice still passed peppermints down the aisle like communion. But this time, when service ended, the congregation didn't avoid me. They surrounded me. Whispers became welcomes. Hands touched my shoulder. People said, "Sorry. Glad you're back. Well, we didn't know what to think." I just nodded. Sometimes healing doesn't sound like violins. Sometimes it sounds like folding chairs and murmured prayers. Back at home, I started putting things on the walls again. Photos, art, a calendar with no crossed-out days. I even called the gardener and asked him to plant roses beside the mailbox. When he asked what kind, I said, "Survivors. Whatever blooms late but still blooms." He smiled. I watched him dig the earth, one seed at a time, not for the past, not even for the future, but for the now, and for the woman still here to see it. And when the breeze picked up and rustled the wind chimes I had just rehung outside my window, I didn't hear ghosts anymore. I heard peace. I heard the breath of a home that survived the fire, and this time I breathed with it. Spring rolled in slowly. The air changed, softer, like the world had stopped bracing for something and finally let its shoulders relax. The kind of air you can sit in without needing to explain yourself to it. I liked that kind of air. Mr. Ellis called again, his voice calm. As always. The DA accepted the plea. The judge signed off. It's done. That was it. No court dates, no sentencing hearing, no last-minute objections, just a gavel behind closed doors and a folder marked resolved. I thanked him. "Dot," he said, lingering. "You can close this chapter now." "Chapters close themselves," I replied. "I'm just the one reading." We both chuckled softly, then said goodbye. Leona came by later that day, a manila envelope tucked under her arm. "Guess what I got?" she said, waving it like a prize. "Tell me that's not another clipping," I groaned. "Better. It's the full case file. Public access now that it's settled. Wanted to show you something." I poured tea while she opened the envelope and spread out the papers across my coffee table. Forms, affidavits, witness summaries, bank records. And then, this, she tapped. A notarized letter. Chanel's statement. It was brief. 2 paragraphs. No tears in the ink. No grand gestures. Just, "I acknowledge the harm caused to Mrs. Dorothy Walker by my actions. I acted out of greed and selfishness. I understand that restitution alone cannot erase the betrayal, but I will spend the rest of my life working to be a person worthy of forgiveness." Signed in neat, tight cursive, Chanel Davis Walker. "Think she meant it?" Leona asked. "Doesn't matter," I replied. And I meant it. I decided to go through my own papers that week. Not legal ones, the personal kind. Journals, letters, photo albums. I found old postcards from Jamal in college full of doodles and hope. A birthday card from his first year married to Chanel, where she had written, "Thank you for raising him right." Funny how time makes liars of us all. Still, I didn't throw any of it out. Maybe I believed in second chances more than I let on. Maybe I was just sentimental. Either way, the box stayed on the shelf. A knock came on a Wednesday. I expected it to be Leona, but when I opened the door, it was a stranger. "Ms. Walker?" she asked, holding a clipboard. "I'm with Fulton County Adult Education Services. We're expanding our community literacy program. Your name came up as a potential volunteer." My eyebrows lifted. "Came up from where?" "Church board. A few folks said you used to be a school principal, that you had presence." I let out a short laugh. "Presence," I repeated. She nodded. "We could use someone who's been through storms. People listen better when the voice comes from somewhere real." I told her I'd think about it. That night, I called Leona. "Should I do it?" I asked. "Girl, you survived your own funeral. Teaching GED prep should be a breeze." 2 weeks later, I stood in front of 10 adult learners, some younger than Jamal, some older than me. Nervous hands, tired eyes, hope, flickering like a candle that hadn't given up yet. I started simple. "Hi, I'm Dorothy. I used to be dead." They laughed, loud and long, ice broken. We read short stories, wrote about memories. One man, Ernesto, wrote about the first time he held his grandson. Another woman, Clarice, wrote about losing her sister and finding strength in an old photograph. I saw pieces of myself in all of them. After class, Ernesto lingered. "You talk like someone who knows loss," he said. "I do," I replied. "And you teach like someone who survived it." "I did," he nodded. "Then we'll learn just fine." That Sunday, I returned to the garden. The roses had bloomed, bright, unapologetic red, like they didn't know they were supposed to stay quiet. I clipped 3 and placed them in a vase beside the photograph of my husband. "Guess what?" I whispered. "Your girl made it through again." The wind chimes outside tapped gently. Music for a life no longer paused. Later that afternoon, Jamal's daughter came by again. She had another drawing. This one showed a classroom. A woman with glasses at the board. Stick figure students. She held it up proudly. "I told Daddy you're a teacher again," she said. My heart squeezed. "What did he say?" She paused. "Nothing, but he didn't say anything mean either." That was enough. For now. I walked her home, hand in hand, and as we passed the magnolia tree, she looked up and asked, "Is that where you came back to life?" I smiled. "No," I said. "That's just where I started living again." It was almost summer when I finally looked in the mirror and saw someone I didn't flinch at. Not the ghost of who I was. Not the shadow of who they thought I'd be. Just me. Dorothy Ann Walker. Hair a little grayer, smile a little slower to come, but when it did, real. And behind my eyes, not fear, not anger, but stillness. the kind that settles after a storm and stays, even when the forecast calls for more. I didn't need to wear armor anymore, but I kept it hanging in the closet, just in case. That morning, I dressed in my oldest church skirt and a cardigan Jamal had given me a decade ago. The color had faded, but it fit just the same. I brushed my hair, put on earrings, and grabbed the envelope Leona had left for me days earlier. Inside it, a handwritten list of names, women who had written letters, not to the courts, not to the papers, to me. Older women, some my age, some older. They told me things they hadn't told anyone. My niece took my checks and said it was hers. I never said a word. My grandson forged my signature and sold my car. My daughter changed the locks while I was at the hospital. Each story different, each wound familiar, and at the end of every letter, but when I saw you walk into that funeral, that was the part that changed them. That was the part that changed me. Leona and I started calling them. One by one, some were scared, some cried, some laughed like they hadn't in years. We didn't offer advice. We offered presence. "Let's start a meeting," Leona said. "Like a support group?" "Like a resistance." So we did. We called it the Revival Circle. Every Tuesday evening, the church basement came alive with folding chairs, mismatched thermoses, and stories that once stayed buried. There was Henrietta, who got her power of attorney back, Clara, who moved out of her daughter's house and found an apartment of her own, even soft-spoken June, who finally told her family no, and meant it, and Loretta, who discovered her grandson had taken out a payday loan in her name. She marched into that office the next morning and shut it down. "I might have been slow," she said, "but I ain't stupid." These women weren't victims. They were survivors, and they were waking up. The news picked up on it eventually. Not my story, ours. The journalist called it a quiet uprising of Southern matriarchs. I laughed when I read that part out loud. Leona said, "Let 'em call it what they want. We know what it is." What's that? Reckoning. One evening, I found myself at the back of the circle just listening. June was sharing. Her voice shook, but her words didn't. When they told me I was too old to fight, I believed them. But then I saw a woman walk into her own funeral like it was church, and I thought, maybe I got one more fight in me, too. The women clapped, and I felt something settle inside me that hadn't rested in years, a kind of belonging I thought was gone forever. Later that night, I walked home alone. The sky was a deep blue, indigo, almost velvet. The stars blinked down like they'd been watching all along. I stood outside my house for a while, not because I was afraid to go in, but because I wasn't afraid to stay out. The wind picked up, soft and steady. Not like the one Jamal used to fear. This one carried stories, the kind passed from woman to woman like recipes and warnings and hymns. I whispered into the night, "I'm still here." And the wind whispered back, "So am I. If someone told your family you had died, and no one even questioned it, how would you react? And if you had the chance to walk into your own funeral, would you? Let me know in the comments. If you found Dorothy's story powerful, give this video a like, hit that subscribe button, and don't forget to tap the bell icon so you never miss a story. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, share it with them. Check out the other videos now showing on your screen, and I'll see you tomorrow, same time, with a brand new story.